It's always a pleasure to come back to visit the Garden Tomb, which has an authenticity and freshness about it. I'll let our guide tell you all about it.
You lived a sinless life, yet you were crucified. You bought our freedom on the cross, forsaken for our sin. You died and rose again. Jesus, you are the Lamb of God. You gave your life away. You gave your life away. You gave your life away.
My name's Bob, and this is a UK accent, as you've probably already gathered from the conversation. So many people feel this is a special place because maybe, and I'll put it no stronger than maybe this is the place where Jesus was crucified, was buried and rose again. Now I'm saying maybe because there's hardly any archaeology here. So now we're all Bible believers here. This is a Christian site. This is actually run by a Christian charity from the UK. So I'm going to explain to you how it fits the Bible. You can then make up your own mind what you think about this place. Is that okay? So I'm not trying to sell the place to you. I'm just going to explain. You can put the pieces, because if you've been in Jerusalem any length of time, you will already know there's two of everything. Is that right? Well, there's probably two of things, and you haven't even been told about the second one. You know, welcome to Jerusalem. This place, by comparison, is the new boy on the block, because this only came into prominence in the 1800s. That's when people started to come back to this land. This land was pretty derelict and barren for hundreds of years. But in the 1800s, when people started to come back, particularly Christians, of course, one of the things they're looking for is, where's Golgotha, where's the place of the skull? And for whatever reason, they didn't focus on the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. What caught their attention was this great lump of rock here in front of you, which goes right the way over there. And this is actually a very old quarry. It's a quarry from the time of King Solomon, which is much older than Jesus. And the reason it caught their attention is something you won't see too clearly today, but actually in the rock face, it's only because it got damaged in the last 2 or 3 years, there is what looks to be like a skull. Now this is an old photograph, and you'll see another better one when we get up there. But this is what they were looking at. Does this look like a skull here, roughly? Yeah? The rich man's garden. When we get down here, we're going to go back into the garden after this, and I'll show you something that makes us believe it actually was a garden 2,000 years ago, and a rich man's garden at that. Is that right? Okay so far? Right. And it's a tomb that fits the biblical description. So you can actually see this fits the New Testament clues, but where it gets more exciting is it also fits the Old Testament. In as much as, if you remember the story of Abraham and Isaac, God told Abraham to sacrifice his only son Isaac. Do you remember the name of the place that was to happen? Mount Moriah. Where's Mount Moriah?
It's under the Temple Mount.
It is, but it's also under here because it's a long reach. In fact, they're coming down. Let's go up. You'll see more what we're talking about. And on the one end is the Temple Mount with the Dome of the Rock. You can have all seen that clearly. This is the other end of that same ridge. So most of it's under the old city, comes out of the old city here. This actually is the highest point of Mount Moriah. So it's so you see where you get your bearings a bit now. You're on Mount Moriah in a little quarry just outside the city walls. You probably don't need me to tell you just how cruel the Romans were. They were a cruel bunch. Crucifixion was barbaric. It was horrible execution. And the reason they did it is that they actually ruled this country by fear. They wanted people to be frightened of them. And so actually when they crucified people, they would do it publicly, openly. They wanted people to see it, wanted people to get the impression, you know, hey, look at this person dying. This could be you if you don't do what the Romans say. So their favourite place to crucify was actually on the side of busy main roads, because that meant people going about their day-to-day business would come in contact with the dying people. Now, if we could put the clock back here 2,000 years, so there would have been none of these buildings here outside the city wall, but this actually was a very busy place, because two main roads came into the city at this point. One from, you've heard of, most of you will have heard of both, the Jericho Road from the east, came in from that side. The Damascus Road came in from that side. Lots of people coming and going, particularly at the time when Jesus died, because that was the Feast of Passover. And the Feast of Passover is part of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, when God commanded all male Jews to come to Jerusalem to keep the feast. So this place would have been thronging with people. All making sense so far? Yeah. So an ideal place from the Romans' point of view. We don't really think he was crucified on the top up there. It's a Muslim cemetery there, but that's not the reason. The reason is it's just physically very difficult to get up there, which means not too many people passing by. We think it's far more likely it's somewhere down here, with this as the backdrop. Does that make sense? With the skull as the backdrop? But wherever it was amongst people passing by. That is.
The sign says wine press.
Sign says wine press, so you go to the top of the class. This is a wine press from the time of Jesus, from the Roman period. Simple wine press. That's where you put the grapes at the top. You trod them by foot, and the juice is caught at the bottom. If you want, feet is the ideal thing for grapes. You crush the grapes, but not the pips. Is it okay? So now they didn't travel too well, so you always had your wine press as close to the crop as possible. So the fact we've got a wine press here, what probably grew here? Grapes, okay. Almost certainly this was a vineyard 2,000 years ago. Now that makes it cultivated, that makes it a garden biblically, but also quite importantly, a vineyard tends to be a rich man's crop. That's not a poor man's crop. Especially if you read the Bible, it takes years before you take a crop off the vine. So that's the best evidence we've got that 2,000 years ago this was a rich man's garden. Now there are other things. That thing I suggested you look down over there, you're actually looking into the top of a cistern. And do you know what a cistern is? Now, so people used to get very excited about this and say this was evidence that people lived and worked here. Well, yes, it is evidence people lived and worked here, but actually we don't know when this one dates from. It could have been here at the time of Jesus, but it's actually been extended since that time. This room here is called the preparation room, or the weeping chamber, because the purpose of this room is this is where bodies were prepared for burial. So if it's the tomb of Jesus, this is where Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, remember Nicodemus? Right. Another secret disciple, another member of the Sanhedrin, where they prepared his body. And the Bible tells us in John's Gospel that they prepared him according to normal Jewish burial custom. And we know what they did. They wrapped his body in linen cloth and with spices and put his body in a tomb. That was normal Jewish burial custom at the time. This would be where the body was prepared. And then you'll find here, in this room to the right there, there's actually a place for two bodies to lie. There's one at the front behind where that wall's been repaired, and one at the back. Now originally there were stone slab benches, so not on the floor as you see it today, but you'll see where the marks were. Some of the oldest photographs of when it was discovered have parts of these benches still in place. About this high, two stone slab benches. And if this is the tomb of Jesus, does anybody know which of those two would be the one that Jesus would have laid on?
5, 4. Number 4.
You're right. No, this is the weeping chamber. This is the room they're standing. These are the two.
Number 4.
Well, they're both number 4.
Yeah,
It's the top one. The top one. From the doorway, he saw the empty grave clothes. That's the one you see from the doorway. This other one you don't see until you're inside. Is that making sense?
Yep.
And that must have been an amazing sight, because the Bible tells us they just didn't understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. But the important thing is, the thing that fits more than anything else, it's empty. It's an empty tomb. So when you get down there, you're going to see nothing. It's an empty tomb. You know, as Christians, we don't worship a hole in the rock, do we? We worship a risen Saviour.
Right.
And this just may well be the very place that it happened.
Your grace has broken every chain.